Before we make it possible to like, update, and delete tracks, let's add the ability to search tracks. We might as well, considering that we have all of the information that is associated with the given track and that we're allowing users to search by. Remember that our search query allows us to search for a track according to its title, the username of the user who posted the track's description. So in order to add this functionality, we'll head to our track component and navigate to search tracks. To build our search input itself, let's uncomment all of our import statements. And within the return to search tracks, we're going to start with a form element. Within form, we'll have a paper component with the class name classes.root. And on paper, we'll set elevation to 1. And this is going to give this paper component, which serves as a kind of backdrop to the input that we'll have within it. It gives it some box shadow to make it stand out a bit. Within paper, we'll have an icon button. Within this button, we'll have an icon of clear icon. And underneath icon button, we'll have a text field. And this is going to be full width. The placeholder will be the text search all tracks. And by default, text field comes with an underline within the input, or I should say underneath the input. And by default, text field has an underline underneath it. So to modify its styles, we can use the input props prop. We pass an object to it, and on it we can set disable underline to true to make sure that there's no underline. Then after this text field, we'll have another icon button, and within it will be the icon search icon. So now let's save and check out how this looks. So here's our search input, which we can type into, and we want the first button to function as a clear button to clear out our input, and we want the second button, this search button or submit button, we want it to, when clicked or when we hit enter, to actually perform our search query on our track list, on the data within our track list, I should say. So first of all, let me change the search button to have a type set to submit. And next we need to figure out how we're going to execute our search mutation, or rather search query, on demand. In the past, say when we were getting data for our track list component, or getting our user data that we put in our shared header component, the queries that were executed for those were done when each of those components mounted. We didn't provide the ability for those queries to be executed when we hit a button. So how do we conditionally execute a query? Well, instead of using the query component from React Apollo, we can use the Apollo consumer component. We touched on this previously to get access to our client, but note that we can directly access our client. We can use our client in order to actually execute a query from it. So let's import Apollo consumer from React Apollo. And just like every previous query that we've executed, we're going to need to import GQL to write it out from Apollo Boost. And to provide the client to our form, we want to wrap the form tags with Apollo consumer tags. So we'll wrap everything. And we'll add our function inside it. In fact, we can just immediately return the JSX from it. So we'll use parentheses here for the return of the function, and we'll put our form within that return. Then in Apollo Consumer, remember that we get access to our client in the parameters. And since we're using a form, once again, we want to add our onSubmit. So when this form is submitted, we want to actually execute our search query. So with onSubmit, we get access to our event, and we'll pass it to a new function called handleSubmit. It's going to take event and client, and we'll put it within our search tracks component, as we've done for every function attached to onSubmit, we want to call event.preventDefault. And next we want to execute our search tracks query. So first, let's write out our query. We'll call this our search tracks query. So first we'll add the query keyword, add our one variable search, which will be of type string and not required. We take our tracks query, pass through our search variable to the search argument, and for each track let's get exactly the same values that are being returned, or rather provided to our track list. So if we head to app and take a look at our get tracks query, we can just copy everything that we have here that we put on our tracks subfield. We'll paste it in. Then heading back up to handle submit, we can take our client, and in order to execute our query, we can say client.query, and this method accepts an object, and we can specify our query on the query attribute. We'll set that to search tracks query, and then any variables that this query might need will be provided on a variables attribute. So variables, again, is an object, and in order to get the value that a user's typed into the input, we need to add on the text field an onChange. So we're going to do this in somewhat of a backwards order. We'll add an onChange and pass through the event to a setter called setSearch that takes event.target.value. Now let's create this piece of state. So we'll bring in useState, and we'll create search and setSearch. And search will have an initial value of an empty string. So now we're setting this search value, and we can pass it to our variables object within client.query. And once again, to get a value back from this operation, we can turn handle submit into an async await function. So we'll await client.query and put the return value in a new variable called res. And for now, let's just console log res. Let's save search tracks, and we'll try searching for a given track that we have in our list. And I'll open my console. So first of all, let's search for test. We get a response that contains 3 tracks, test 1, 2, and 3, so that's good. Let's search for Doug. So we get a response with just 1 track, the track that was posted by user with the username Doug. And then taking a look at our descriptions, let's just search for description, and we should get all 4 results, and we do, since all 4 tracks contain the word description in their description.